So, good afternoon. My name is Laura Sims, and I'm going to be your moderator this afternoon for this first global webinar hosted by the Educational Advisory Council of the Coalition for Global Citizenship 2030 in partnership with the International Day of Education for Global Citizenship Steering Committee. We are thrilled that our guests are present, our speakers and panelists, and that we can share this significant presentation and conversation in service of equality, peace, and the eradication of poverty through engaged global education. Particularly poignant today following the massive walkout and demonstration of young people yesterday, not only in the United States, but throughout the world. So it's my job to welcome our generous speakers, panelists, and those of you listening worldwide. I'll give instructions as we go along for each part. So the schedule today is divided into 3 20-minute segments. After I introduce our first speakers, who will make their presentation, it will be followed by a presentation by panelists who will then reflect on and ask questions that came up during the presentation. That will be the speakers from IDEGC and the panelists representing the Steering Committee for the Education Advisory Council. I'm also part of that committee, and I want to thank Georgiana Galanis and Constance Sensor from that committee for their hard work, and for our speakers who have really put this together, Dr. Scott Carlin and Dr. Uni Jung. Before I introduce them, I think, Uni, are you going to say something, or do you want me to give your bios first?
I guess I'm going to just say briefly what we are going to present, and then you can introduce us after that, because Scott's going to speak first. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming here, and we are so excited to share our initiative. And first, we are going to present who we are, and then the background of this initiative, and then we also want to try to make sure we all share the understanding of concept on global citizenship and the importance of education for global citizenship. So at the end, we would like to talk about the why we need to create a day of education for global citizenship. So I will let you speak further to introduce Dr. Scott Carlin, I guess.
It's really a pleasure to make these introductions of such illustrious and wonderful people. So Dr. Scott Carlin is going to speak first. He's an associate professor of geography at Long Island University Post and director of the Post's new Center for Sustainability. He co-chaired the United Nations DPI NGO 66th Conference in South Korea in 2016, Education for Global Citizenship, Achieving the Sustainable Development Goals for All. At the United Nations, he's an NGO representative for Long Island University Post and the International Society of Doctors for the Environment. He's an elected member of the NGO DPI Executive Committee and co-chair of the Steering Committee for International Day of Education for Global Citizenship. He recently co-authored The Role of Civil Society in Advancing Global Citizenship with the UN Chronicle. Ms. Uni Jung is the founder and president of IDEGC, if I'm saying that correctly, International Virtual Schooling, and she serves as the CEO of IDEGC Korea. She's also the co-chair of the NGO Steering Committee for an International Day of Education for Global Citizenship. She's appointed as the international advisor of the annual Pyeongchang Olympics Forum, focusing on the Earth and its citizens. She has consulted with kindergarten through 12th grade in schools, technology firms, NGOs, ministries of education in the United States and throughout the world, including North Africa and Australia. And these are just a few of her accomplishments. So,
thank you. Steve, do you want to bring up the PowerPoint for us? So, as Laura noted, I had the pleasure of co-chairing the 66th UNDPI NGO conference that was held in Gyeongju in the Republic of Korea. And that conference was about education for global citizenship, as Laura noted. And so what we'd like to do is talk about that founding history of the day, and talk about the founding history of this call for an international day, and put that into the context of global citizenship education. So we've got a couple of different items that we want to talk about as shown on the screen, the index of topics here. So moving forward to the, I can control from this. It's not advanced. Oh no. So, okay, good. Now, okay. So the conference theme brought together people from around the world, and at the conclusion of that conference, the outcome document that was produced was the Gyeongju Action Plan. And there were many things that civil society thought were important to note about the conference and the aspiration of the 4,000 people who participated in that conference. One of those items in that action plan was a call for an international day to promote global citizenship education. So the conference was in June 2016. A group of us that had been involved in planning that conference, as well as other allied advocates for international education, met in New York over the summer in 2016, and we began planning and thinking about creating a steering committee to advance that program. So what we've done to help keep people in the loop of our work is we created this Facebook page. So pretty easy to find, Facebook/International Day of Education. And it's really important to try to make note of that, because that's where we post a lot of updates. For example, we're doing this webinar today. At the end of the month, on March 29th, we're doing a workshop in New York to further advance the work that we're going to discuss today. And we'll have updates posted to the Facebook page about that. That's really the best way to stay in touch with us. So this is some text from that Gyeongju Action Plan. And it, again, highlights this call for an International Day of Education to promote global citizenship. And it is this kind of specific text that brought us together as the steering committee to advance the International Day of Education for global citizenship. There are many, many initiatives underway in New York and around the world that are looking at global citizenship. And that is going to only expand in coming years. So we're very convinced that education for global citizenship is a theme that has to be taught in schools around the world, and really at all levels of education. We're not actually advocating that this be limited to a single elective class in schools. We're instead advocating that teachers, schools, educators, students begin to recognize that global citizenship is a perspective that is integral to many aspects of education and really should be thread through a wide range of educational experiences. And there are many other agencies within the UN system, NGOs, foundations, corporations that are recognizing the value of global citizenship and the importance of education around that theme. We've just highlighted a couple of keystones for us in our work to advance this. So, for example, the UNAI is the United Nations Academic Impact. They work with universities around the world. They have a global citizenship education hub that's worth following. UNESCO has done a lot of important and path-breaking work around global citizenship education. Their work has been very important to our discussions, and we've been sharing with some of their technical staff some of our ideas and seeking their input. The SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, in SDG 4 on quality education, specifically references the importance of global citizenship. And we believe that global citizenship is actually an integral part of forming partnerships to advance the SDGs and really achieving all of the SDGs in their fullest form. So we really believe that global citizenship education is an essential part of education for many reasons, but these global goals are one of those core reasons. And lastly, the Republic of Korea and the country of Qatar have sponsored a Friends Group for Global Citizenship, and they're working actively with missions to look at the topic of global citizenship, what it means for nations around the world, and how they're each, in their own cultural context, exploring that issue. So who is a global citizen? There is a wide range of definitions available. We don't claim that any one definition adequately captures all that is important, but some of the themes that we think are important to touch upon are someone who holds universal values of justice, equality, dignity, and respect, someone who understands global issues, someone who embraces their own heritage, but also learns to transcend their own personal background, to learn about other cultures, embrace other cultures, and someone who acts collaboratively and responsibly to find global solutions. So the education for global citizenship component are all the technical competencies, and there are many, that go into being able to advance those specific values and actions in what people do. And we'll talk more about some of those competencies a little later. Yunfi will get into that specifically.
Thank you, Scott, because he overviewed all the importance and background of the global citizenship and education for global citizenship. I will bring up some more concrete examples so that you can have better understanding of education for global citizenship. Here's a story. There was a high school in America, Ohio, and also in a high school in Korea. They were working together over the virtual platform. But what they were concerning about was poverty issue and hunger issue. Although they are working together globally and they have common problem, what they were working on is how to provide, how to achieve the no poverty and zero hunger in their own community locally. But in the meantime, they communicated with each other to share their different cultural background perspectives, to provide ideas that their solution could be applied to other global communities. So they are working on a local community's problem, but their solution is what they are trying to do is not only for their own community, but also they knew what they are doing is going to make an impact to the global community. So they come up with a solution that will work not only for their own community, but also the global community. While doing these activities, what they are gaining is global citizenship. So I'm going to show you how the global citizenship is constructed. So education for global citizenship, we call 21st century literacy. And what this global citizenship should have as a competency, there are 5 dimensions, which you can see: self-awareness, knowledge, attitude, and language proficiency and skills. And actually all those things came from UNESCO's Delaw's report on 4 pillars of learning. That is 4 goals of learning. That is, we are learning to be, learning to know, learning to live together, learning to know and to do. So it is all related to understanding. The self-awareness is related to be. Self-awareness means critically looking at yourself and think about your perspective. What is the important things in your life? Why you are learning? Who you are? These are the matter of self-awareness. Based on that questions, you're trying to get knowledge, information, and then communicate with others effectively to deal with situation. So communication is involved in language proficiency, skill, dealing with conflict situation, problem solving is action, we call skill. And attitude, while you are doing together, you have respect for cultural diversity differences and similarities of people in different background and areas. That's attitude, and they are willing to work together and they do something for each other. That's attitude. How it connects with the UNESCO's dimensions on global citizenship. Actually, all these things rooted from 4 pillars of learning, and UNESCO actually make the connection between them. It goes this way. Global citizenship domain has 3 domains, which is cognitive dimension, social-emotional dimension, behavioral dimension. The cognitive dimension, as you can see, is about knowledge, something, information, related information, and how to communicate. Once you know some information, you can communicate language proficiency. So it's related to those 3 areas. Social-emotional dimension is also social. You have to aware of yourself in context of social interactive context. So it also includes to be, and emotional attitude, the affection is related to the social-emotional dimension, also compassion. And the language proficiency is always play its role to make the better and appropriate social interaction. And behavior dimension, throughout this whole interaction and communication, you need to know how to deal with the matter and problem appropriately, effectively. That's a behavioral dimension. Having those all considered as a global citizenship domain and dimension and competency, what we really want to have is schools and education system, informal or formal system, integrate this global citizenship into their learning, teaching and learning processes in a holistic manner and integrated manner. So we emphasize that 21st century global citizenship is all about for humanity, how it works. When you are designing teaching and learning, you need to include communication and collaboration. This is all about how to effectively, appropriately communicate and collaborate to solve the problem creatively for others based on understanding and respect towards differences and similarities we all have. So when you are designing the curriculum, we want to include the 6C. This is communication, collaboration, critical thinking, creativity, cultural awareness. On top of that, when we talk about global citizenship, you have more attention and emphasis on compassion. Compassion is not only just emphasize others' feeling or difficulty, but also you try to do something on it. That's compassion. Responsibility, you understand what you are doing, what you are thinking, can have an impact on not only your own life, but also your society and global community. That's responsibility has been very much emphasized through the education for global citizenship. At the end of the day, and it's a whole about to live together so that we can create the humanity in a more peaceful, just, equal, and sustainable world. That's the whole goal of this global citizenship education. So now here is some of the example. You can see some of the topic. I just want you to get some glance of the education for global citizenship, teaching and learning topics. Values in society and your perspective. Students can talk about those aspects in their classroom. If you have the cultural partner, it will make the effect be more effective. And human impact on the ecosystem. They see the relationship between human and the planet. And problems in our community. Don't think that global citizenship is all about global issues. Something you pay attention to, what's happening in your community, is also global citizenship. But you know it's all applied to the whole world, interconnected. So these are some of the examples of the activities. And here I would like to share the outcome of this whole education for global citizenship. Importantly, as you can read, feel free to read. You can see the bold text, perspective. Students know this is all about perspective, awareness, remember? And they know why they are learning. They have willingness to learn further, that's attitude. And they know what they didn't know and what they know now, what they want to know further, knowledge. And then at the end, they want to help make the better world. as much as they can, and then they see themselves to become global citizens. That's what students are talking about. And out of this activity, what I was very happy about is one teacher sent email saying the students, although it's already over 6 p.m., they are not going home. They keep working on their project. And then the teacher has to push them out from the classroom. And then what they are doing is trying to make change for their community. That's education for global citizenship. So now I'm going to let Scott talk about our next step.
Step it up. So what we want to explore is how global citizenship helps achieve the global goals, and we want to just keep this part brief. We can come back to this later in the Q&A. For example, towards the end of this bullet list, some of you may know, otherwise we encourage you to look at recent reports from UNESCO looking at violent extremism and looking at the question of how education for global citizenship can play a role in helping to kind of bend the curve that afflicts the planet right now in terms of the violence, the loss of life, the damage to property associated with violent extremism. We want children learning from a very early age that people from other cultures, other religions, other social strata are not their enemy, that everybody needs to live peacefully with each other. But to achieve that, there must be a commitment to social justice as well. It's not a commitment to leave things as the status quo. It's a commitment to really find a better balance with each other and with the planet. There's a lot that can be said about the value of global citizenship towards achieving global goals, and I'm sure our discussants will have more to say on that. So what we're planning, as I indicated at the outset, is on March 29th, we want to host a workshop where we can begin to lay out a clearer strategy with our guests about how to work with missions. We want to hear from missions where their countries are at with respect to education for global citizenship. And we want to know what it is that they're striving to achieve right now in that realm. And we really want to hear how they are trying to approach this topic creatively. And then we want to share with them their suggestions for how best to approach and promote the concept of an International Day of Education for Global Citizenship. So we've done a lot of preliminary work the past 18 months, and the end of this month is really the launch of the next chapter of our work together to really have a very formal way of engaging with missions, working with a much larger audience of volunteers, and really begin to collect a lot of information from missions at the UN that represent the countries from around the world. So thank you, Laura, for the opportunity to present today.
Wow. I don't think anybody could argue with any of this. We would like to see an equitable and good and compassionate world. One of the beauties of today is that you have a kind of taste of all the work that they've been doing. And now we have 4 discussants who are part of the steering committee for the Education Advisory Council of the Coalition for Global Citizenship 2030, working in partnership with the International Day of Education. So I'm going to introduce our 4 panelists, and we have only 20 minutes, although time is unusual. And so I'm going to introduce everybody, and let's keep it short. And then if you who are listening anywhere in the world have a question, a reflection, a thought, or you suddenly want to volunteer for the rest of your life to work on this, please text us during, and we have somebody who's collecting those texts. So I want to introduce Dr. Marit Wozinski. Marit, red shirt, is the Senior Sustainability Scientist at Arizona State University and the President of the Global Network for Sustainable Development. The network's mission is to involve youth in realization of the UN Sustainable Development Goals by creating global sustainability and peace clubs in high schools. Then Susan Bello, and she's a PhD in expressive therapy. licensed art therapist in Brazil and the United States, founder and director of the Organization for the Arts and Whole Brain Learning, Inc. She is the author of Spontaneous Painting, Creating the Symbol Journey, creator of the I method of spontaneous painting, which develops everyone's innate, authentic, multiple intelligences. Tony Jenkins is the adjunct professor of justice and peace studies at Georgetown University, George Mason University. He is the National Peace Academy Vice President for Academic Affairs and serves as the global coordinator of the International Institute on Peace Education and the Global Campaign for Peace Education at Georgetown University. Is Kyle here with us yet? Okay. I don't see Kyle, but maybe I can hear him. Kyle D. Anderson is the director of the Center for Global Citizenship at Center College in Danville, Kentucky. His distinguished career includes co-editor of a bilingual poetry magazine. He is also one of the college's more active study abroad instructors, leading 8 different trips throughout the world. And he's the director of external affairs of Myanmar's first liberal arts college. So I turn it over to our speakers, and if you can try to keep your reflections within 5 minutes. Thank you. So Marit, do you want to begin?
Okay. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I have a couple of reflections after listening to the presentation. The first one.
Marit, could you please come closer to your microphone and speak loudly, please?
Come closer to my microphone. Okay. Is it better now?
Yeah. Better, yeah.
All right. So I have a couple of reflections after listening to your presentations. The first one, yes, we definitely need to have like a big meta vision of educational system. But I don't need to tell you that there is a big gap between our ideal model of education and reality on the level of the ground. I've been traveling a lot lately to some poorest countries in the world, and I've seen a lot of schools where children don't have even desks. They just sit, on the ground, and the teacher is talking to them. And so it's a long way to create really infrastructure there, which will allow them to learn everything what we want them to learn. This is one perspective. The other, those of you who are in education, you know that educational system is like a big ship. If it wants to take a turn, it takes a long time, and it takes a long way. It's extremely bureaucratic institution in most of the countries, and it's extremely difficult to make reform and changes and so on. Yes, we have progressive schools, we have schools that experiment, but we are still very far away from the ideal situation, like this one which you presented in your presentations. We had a conference a couple of months ago in Phoenix, and one of the keynote speakers was the CEO of Intel, originally from India. Absolutely amazing and competent speaker. At the end of his presentation, we asked him, when you think about your education, which part of your education contributed the most? Can you hear me? Yes? Which part of your education contributed the most to your success in life? And he just smiled and said, nothing what I learned in the classrooms. Nothing what I learned in the classrooms. Everything what I learned in my extracurriculum activities, in my involvement in community projects, and an extra type of experience. So there is some kind of a lesson for us from this, that until we are able to change the system and convince all teachers and educational system and policymakers that this is where we should go with our education, we need to go to the ground level and invest in youth and try to create for them the opportunity that they will learn all those things you were talking about. And in a sense, this is the mission of the network which we created lately, that we create extracurriculum activities for students to learn how to create partnerships, to learn about sustainable development, to learn about nonviolence and peaceful conflict resolutions and so on. And here just we need to really collaborate with each other. There are so many organizations, you mentioned some of them, all around the world, who are going the same direction. But sometimes we even don't know, who is where and what we do. So probably for us, it will be a big task to create partnership for global citizenship education. So these are my reflections on what I heard.
Thank you, Marit. For some of us who's breaking up, and I want to assure everyone that we're recording this, so you can hear it again, and hopefully we will even document it. Thank you. Susan Bello, your reflections, please. I think you have to press your microphone. So
You
hear
did.
Great.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. Marit, I was so touched by what you said. And
So for you breaking up, can you hold it 1 second? We're going to see what
Sure.
technically it
Mhm.
seems are
Yeah, we're gonna just turn off everyone else's video and then we'll keep going.
perfect. Okay, 2 seconds.
can I speak now? Yes? Okay. Marit, I was so touched by what you just said. And some of the ideas that I agree with you, and what it evoked in me is, yes, we are facing a very bureaucratic educational institution. It's very hard to break in. And there are a lot of organizations like mine, for instance, Organization for the Arts and Whole Brain Learning, and many others that exist individually. And if there was a way, can you still see me?
Yep.
Okay. And if there was a way that we could mobilize all of these organizations that are now separate into a movement, that would have greater impact than each organization separately trying to fight to get into this bureaucratic institution. And for me, one of the most important goals in education is the balance between intellectual learning, math, science, reading, which is so important, with the innate, authentic, multiple intelligences, which is emotional literacy, creative literacy, developing everyone's imagination, intuition, symbolic learning, to name a few. And so it seems to me that if children, and actually people of all ages, were understood for who they really are, if they were able to connect to and understand for themselves who they really are behind the social mask, and interact with each other in a way that we begin to understand not only who we are, but what we see one another for who the other person really is, then we start to connect as human beings. And it's a deeper connection than just going in and wanting to learn math, science, but not having social interaction with each other, which we do in the IMI method, by having people paint spontaneously their inner world, and then everyone explores the paintings and discusses how they feel about each other's paintings, what it evokes in them. So those are some of the ideas that I have about how this is a method that would create human development. And that seems to be a lot of what's missing right now, is character development, how to create human development in order to be a better global citizen, how to learn to interact with one another and listen to our own needs. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you very, very much, Susan. Following on Marit, it's very inspiring and helpful. And Tony Jenkins, can you turn your microphone on? Everybody else, turn yours off so we can best hear you.
Great, thank you. I'm very excited to actually see and hear Susan, whom I haven't seen in maybe 15 or so years. So it's nice to reconnect in this virtual platform. I have a lot of interesting thoughts on this, so 5 minutes will be a challenge, as I'm sure it is for my fellow respondents. But 4 or 5 years ago, I was a member of UNESCO's expert advisory group on global citizenship education. So this has been something I've been exploring, and my ideas on global citizenship education have continued to evolve over the years. In the context of the work at UNESCO, one of the things that always challenged me is the work of global citizenship education in that context is really a normative project. And we can trace it back for more than 40 years under different titles, even going back to 1974 with the UNESCO recommendation concerning education for international understanding, cooperation, and peace, and education relating to human rights and fundamental freedoms. At least back then, they attempted to extrapolate everything into one long title that included everything. But the success of that normative project, we have a hard time seeing. So that normative project has evolved over the years. It's been education for tolerance and understanding. It's been peace education. It's been disarmament education. And now the new framework within UNESCO and the UN and the Sustainable Development Goals is global citizenship education. So where do we go, and how do we move forward and truly see this normative project creating the sorts of social, political, and cultural changes that we see as really fundamental to the task at hand? I think it's a complex mix of things. I think what Susan is describing in terms of the cognitive, social, emotional, and behavioral dimensions, these are, to me, the essential sort of work of developing the inner moral resources that become the foundation for our ability to work externally in political ways. I think when we look and think about responsibility as a big part of the framework of global citizenship education, where I think we are still missing the mark is in terms of looking at GCE as supporting and developing students' political and civic efficacy. There's a lot of the ways in which we look at and even frame things such as the Sustainable Development Goals as they seem very top-down and not very bottom-up. So to think about how GCE supports the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals, we need to almost reframe them. They're well-stated principles and ideas, but students and other learners and citizens need to understand what is their role and responsibility in seeing and making this happen. It's not going to happen out of the self-interest of nation states. So I just think that that's probably the one action that I think still needs to be developed a little bit more clearly, is how do we make these intersections with global citizenship education and responsibility as education for social, civic, and political efficacy.
Thank you. Kyle, are you there? Are you on the phone, Kyle Anderson? No, he's not there. So we have a little extra time for the three of you, and I just want to remind those of you who are listening in to please text us any of your insights or questions that come up, or if you have a project that you want us to know about. But Tony, Susan, Mara, why don't you each take 2 minutes if there's something that you want to further respond before we go to questions and answers.
Yes, I have something. Can I say something? Yes, do you hear me?
Okay.
Yes. Well, you know, I'm a psychologist. And so I look at everything from the psychological perspective. And I see a red flag. In the era of technology, more and more people believe that if we provide people with information, students with information, we can change their behavior. And it's the biggest mistake ever. Because yes, information is important, but first we need to believe that information is true. We need to have motivation to apply this information, and we need to know how to apply it. And here is, this human aspect of information that we heard about, the role of art, the role of thinking, the role of interactions with people. We need to create for students situations where they interact with each other, when they are learning by doing, because this is how they develop motivation to change the world. Otherwise, information, you may know everything about everything, and there is nothing coming out of this. So, and our educational system also has to somehow change the attitude. Information is not enough. Learning by doing, learning in the communication and contact with the community, as the last speaker said.
Marit, it's a very important point. Susan, did you have something to say? Yes.
I forgot to mention something that.
Marit, can you turn your microphone off, please?
Done.
Okay. I will be offering a training program in the IMI method of spontaneous painting at the Holistic University in Brasilia, Brazil, called Unipais. And it's going to begin July. It's a 14-month program, and it will be given in Portuguese. It's partially, people come to meet 3 times a year, and the rest is all online. It's something that's never been done before. I'm so excited to do it. And since art is the universal language, I look forward to doing it in other countries with other people as well. So I would like people who are interested in knowing more about it. If you speak Portuguese, the website is pinturaespontanea.org. And there is also an English website, but it doesn't have anything about the training program, but that's spontaneouspainting.com. And it is my hope to offer the training program.
Make sure that we can send that out to all of our.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
So
it is my
to give a minute or two to Tony if he has something else that he'd like to say. Thank you, Susan. Turn your microphone off because we're in a funny way here. Yes.
Sure. So 2 last thoughts. In responding to Mark's point, I think the other part of the work that we still want to develop a little bit more further is the pedagogical task. We know what the outcome kind of knowledge and behavioral and attitudinal goals are, but how we get there and the process determines largely the kinds of the real kinds of political possibilities that we see that can emerge. I mean, I think this is way too long to try to explain in a minute or two, but I think at least at a very fundamental level, pedagogically, we need to work on incorporating and developing self-reflective capacities. So students are at least weighing in and considering their own values and perspectives and challenging their own worldviews. The last thing I want to mention is in relation to the way I was sort of contesting in the way the SDGs are written. I'm hoping to have the time here in the next few months to work on developing a kind of a treatment of the Sustainable Development Goals, to kind of write them and reframe them as not just sort of a key sustainable goals or rights or principles, but to tie them up with the accompanying responsibilities of citizens to see that those things are manifest. I mean, as citizens, we have certain responsibilities to hold our leaders responsible.
And I think we'll have time. I think we'll have more time for reflection. But thank you. I think we got the essential seed point there. So I just want to thank our discussants. A very beautiful conversation going from the inner foundations from mind outwardly to civil society. Thank you. We'd like to open this up to questions for our panelists and our speakers from those of you who are watching. Daniel, maybe you can, if there are some questions already, I'm not sure how this happens.
Sean has a question.
So, Jean, perhaps you have a question for us?
Yes, thank you very much. I want to thank everyone, of course, and I'm looking at some familiar faces, so it's a pleasure to be with you even virtually, truly. And so I want to reflect on a couple of things. One of which was touched, of course, by our co-chairs, Scott and Yunhee, but most recently by Tony. And in reference back to the Jeonju conference that took place in 2016. And as you know, Tony, we were trying to get you on one of those. So it's a shame that we were not able to. But nevertheless, the three pillars at the time spoke about formal education, informal education, and the third one was advocacy, exactly what you were just speaking about, Tony. And so my point to that is that one of the reasons why the experts, and one of them is sitting at the table, our dear friend Daniel, was able to put in our NGO suggestion to urge member states and the United Nations to create this day. And we know, trust us, we know there's a lot of fatigue at the UN and by NGOs about creating just another day. But trust me when I say, and Georgina can help me there, when we work on other days, such as Peace Day, for instance, or Earth Day, or Water Day, they are strong platforms for advocacy. So in the spirit of the Jeonju conference, what stayed with us, you know, our dear special advisor, Ambassador Han, you know, asked us to keep the momentum of the Jeonju conference going. I urge you all to look, and in some of the things that you just mentioned, Anthony, is so important that if you have a chance to look at the action document again that was prepared by Daniel and colleagues, because so much of what you just described is part of that. And I urge everyone here to keep this treasure of the work that we're all doing through the years. We cannot, you know, forget some of the work that's been done already. And if we can encourage each one of us to stay as connected as we all can, so that we don't try to reinvent the wheel. You know, it's time that we all come together and see how we can actively and really in action show people that we're hearing the work that's been done in Jeonju and elsewhere. We've heard you, and we thank the experts, but also how can we keep that momentum going is a lot of what I heard from what you said, Tony. So I'm very thankful that you shared that. Thank you all.
I'd like to have anybody respond to that who is on the panel or one of the speakers to talk about. Perhaps, Scott, you might even want to talk about it because of the Day of Global Education.
Sure. Thank you, Jean, for sharing with us. I think you're entirely right that these other days, like the Peace Day and Water Day that the UN currently celebrates, they're very effective platforms for education. They're also very effective platforms for advocacy. A lot of organizations are able to use these days to mobilize their members for very specific causes and to bring greater public awareness to very critical issues, such as the scarcity of water that exists in the world right now, and the fact that water scarcity is very likely, in all probability, going to increase in severity in coming decades because of processes like climate change, but also vexing issues like economic inequality. So the International Day of Education for Global Citizenship should be thought of as an educational opportunity. But one of the things I think that really requires emphasis is that global citizenship as a framework is an action-oriented framework, and the educational tools that ought to be part of every child's learning are really action-oriented educational learning processes. For example, global citizenship should be taught in a way that emphasizes experiential learning. It should be taught in a way that is interdisciplinary. It should be intercultural. And that might sound complicated. It might sound like teacher fatigue already setting in, but things like the internet are making this very affordable and also very powerful for students. We shouldn't underestimate the yearning that students have to gain control of these tools. I was impressed with all the discussive comments, and I really feel that if we begin to see the students themselves using these kinds of programs, we immediately see that they're very touched by it. They are very inspired by working with students from other parts of the world, and they also have an incredible leap in their learning, meaning they really accelerate in school. They dedicate more time to it.
So thank you. There's a lot of passion between all of us, and very important. But I want to give an opportunity if there's anyone else who has a particular question or idea. Yes.
I have a question.
There's another one from Cecilia. Sorry.
Question. Okay.
So maybe Cecilia can ask her question, and then Marit, you can comment. Thank you.
Or it could just be it because she's
Okay.
typed it in the chat box.
Ah,
It says in some countries they celebrate a Teacher's Day. Would this connect with what we are trying to do? And then we have Willie Lapalainen, who is offering to contribute his perspectives. He's doing a lot of work from Finland on the same issue, and just wants to make sure that we are connected with other networks that exist, including his as well.
wonderful. Well, this actually has come up. This need for a network. Do you want to say something?
Really, Lapalainen. That one?
Okay.
I can give you the contact information. Really, it's a wonderful guy.
Yes, Finland was just voted the happiest country in the world.
Well, actually, if I comment on one thing about Finland, because it's going to be very impactful to work with Finland network, because Finland is well known as a good practitioner of education, good education. And in their education system, if we could demonstrate how the education for global citizenship will work out, it would be wonderful. Also, I learned Finland is kind of removing their subject matter and text-based learning system and making it more flexible and open. And that's actually the way to go for the 21st century education. And we will be very happy to work with Finland community to provide more exemplary work of education for global citizenship. And please contact us with the very exact contact information so that we can be connected. Thank you.
Wonderful. I wondered, Georgina, if you wanted to say anything about what you've been doing with young people.
We can discuss the group that's a subcommittee of the Advocacy Council of Educators and Coalition for Global Citizenship. What I'd really like to do is first comment to something that Jean Trudel said with regards to the international days, and wanted to really focus on last year's presentation at the high-level forum on the culture of peace, which was centered on early education and how important that is, that we begin this process early for children to really learn leadership qualities and conflict resolution and character building. So that was an excellent presentation with lots of different educators that presented and were very motivated in joining the Coalition for Global Citizenship and the Culture of Peace hand in hand to go forth and create sort of a global curriculum that goes across borders and cultures and unites people. So that's all very important, and I think that's the reason we're all getting together now to create this movement for the Coalition for Global Citizenship and the International Day for Education for Global Citizenship, that teachers can find new ways of learning a different method of teaching in the classroom and incorporating the formal and the informal, the STEAM methods, and wisdom ways, tradition ways from the indigenous, bringing these thoughts and ideas into the classroom so we get to understand each other on a more human level. And so I just wanted to take this opportunity to also read our mission statement for the Advocacy Council of Educators. So if there are people out there listening and would like to contact us, this is what we focus on. So we, as the Advocacy Council of Educators for CGC, we provide advocacy and access to global expertise from the formal and informal resources, science, technology, engineering, arts, math, and culture of peace education endowments, and contributions bridging the gap towards global citizenship curriculums, incorporating the UN SDG 4.7, bridging the gap, the elimination of poverty through education reform, which is SDG 1, and SDG 16 and 17, collaborating for a better humanity towards the evolution of thriving culture of peace and global citizenship. I just really would like to also thank all the discussants that were on the line. I think that each of your comments really rounded up what we've been talking about within our committees in these rooms for the past 3 years as we've been developing this concept. So the movement is coagulating through the UN community, and Scott Carlin and Uni Young and Daniel Carell have given so much dedication and commitment to moving this forward. So we really thank you for all that you've done, and especially to the Korean mission and to our Ambassador Han, and into the future as we develop this concept. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Georgie. I don't know if we actually related. Was it Steve? Did you ask the question about International Teachers' Day? Cecilia. So does anybody have anything to say about the importance of that?
The answer is yes. Cecilia's comment that could we use Teachers' Day to advance this, and the answer is yes. So what I shared earlier was we want to look at a variety of ideas. We want to hear from missions what they think is important in the realm of global citizenship, what they're advancing in their own countries, and we want to share with them our idea of an international day, but it's really a sharing process with the mission. We really want to know what they believe would work best, to document that, share that with other missions, and it's a very kind of iterative, collaborative, partnership-based approach that we as a steering committee are taking to this question. And it may very well be that Cecilia's right. It may be that people say, hold this into Teachers' Day. It may take still a resolution of the General Assembly to formalize that. So, we'll have to just explore what the sense of the UN is around this issue.
Yeah, also, since there is a audience talking about using a certain day, it would be also good to promote this education for citizenship. So I wanted to share some ideas we've been sharing. We were talking about even International Day of Literacy, International Day of Peace, so we can work all together. But on top of it, since we see that global citizenship is core driving force to achieve all SDGs, furthermore, to create a better humanity and society, so we really dedicated to create International Day of Education for global citizenship. And we could actually start a festival to celebrate International Day of Education for global citizenship. Actually, the global citizenship has been included in the SDG goal, July 19, 2015. So if we maybe take that day as an International Day of Education for global citizenship and start celebrating it with the teachers and all the educators together, and also have another continuous celebration during the Teachers' Day and another International Day, I think it will be very much impactful, and that's what we want to pursue. It is all about humanity and all about us, so we can work together and make a maximum impact by having those days. Thank you.
Thank you. I really like to say, as a storyteller working throughout the world and working in global education, that I would love to see a core part of it of sharing all the great wisdom stories of the world in an engaged way that really promotes experience of mindfulness and presence and reciprocity as a natural yearning that children have.
Actually, storytelling is very powerful tool. Actually, our organization also about to connect classes in different countries, talking about story, including their perspective and value systems so that they can understand themselves better and also understand others. One of our discussants talked about character building and understanding with each other, interacting properly, one another. Storytelling could be very, very good means for that.
Please call on me. I'm
Yeah.
directed the biggest storytelling festival in the world. And yes, does someone else have a question? Right here. Yeah. Marit, where are you?
I have a question to our friend who I assume
Can't hear you. Can you? Is your speak
Closer to the mic.
closer? Oh, closer. Come close to us.
I have a question to our friend who I assume is a business. Am I correct?
We can't hear you. Would other people, if other people turn their speakers off?
Okay. I have a question for the at the table who I yes?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
What is your view on the role of faith communities in education for global citizenship? The role of faith communities.
Okay, can you speak again, please?
Okay, my question is for our friend who is a Buddhist, and if he could tell us what is his opinion about the role of faith communities in education for global citizenship.
Well, I think it's an important thing actually to have either interreligious dialogue or interfaith dialogue through this virtual education stuff. It's very important. And I think me and Dr. Ying was talking about last year actually where we can do something. I think it's very helpful, and we do have some experience too, as I talked about. I think in future, I can see that there's a possibility to have, interreligious education, interfaith education, or multi-faith education too. It just need to be, you have to engage people who are interested together, and then make it happen.
Yeah, also in addition to it, if I can add some more thoughts, somebody actually from one of our audience sent us a question in advance. He also was interested in how the faith-based education could be related to the education for global citizenship. And I can tell, I cannot tell very well, I don't know, I'm emphasizing. I don't know about faith education so much, but I can tell this much. Faith education also try to promote understanding of themselves. They constantly ask questions about their perspective, and they will help people realize what they know, what they don't know, so that they can go above than they are perceiving until that point. So also they emphasize constructivist approach. It is not about just information, as Marit said, but about learning by doing, experimental theory also, trying to read. So this is all related, I think. The critical pedagogy, critical thinking is all related to this faith-based education and also education for global citizenship. But importantly, I actually wanted to ask anybody in this audience who could talk about faith-based education. It's based on constructivism, but constructivism, the basic assumption is there is not actually given truth, right? You try to explore the facts and truth by exploring, asking questions, and by experimenting. But faith-based and religious education actually has some given truth they believe. How do they apply the constructivism into those faith-based education? Actually, Dan is smiling from Baha'i International. He might have something to tell about it.
Yeah, I'm smiling because it depends on how you understand faith. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a growing group of individuals around the world, regardless of their religions, who are thinking about religious education or faith-based education more about how do we apply the religion. And in that sense, we are learning. It isn't a textual analysis, it's more a practical application. And so it really depends on your understanding of faith itself. But I know that there are certain efforts that are being undertaken in different regions and countries around the world where the local school systems are offering places for any religious individuals to come to the classrooms and teach, and then the parents can choose which religion to go to or not. And it can be sort of an elective-based approach. And in this way, you sort of separate yourself from the dangers of church and state, because now it's up to the individuals themselves to use an open platform, so there is no preference given. But then it depends on how those religious individuals, those teachers are using the space. And I know in the Baha'i community, we very much are learning about the application of service in our lives. And service, I think, is at the heart of all religions when taken to the essence. And in this sense, it changes sort of the notion of religious-based education and brings it to more along the lines of what we've been talking about today, which is global citizenship. And that's, I think, why I was smiling.
Well, I'm going to interrupt this for just a second. This is such a rich conversation that probably it needs to be one of these, one of our next global
webinars.
conversations.
Yeah.
But maybe you'd like to say something, and then I want to give Joseph a chance, and Connie, and if you'd like to speak. But you want to say something?
Yeah, I think also from 9/11, after 9/11, so the religious education in the high school also changed. A lot of schools also incorporated also the religious studies or studied religion in high school, or even at least like subject also. Like I know here in New York, also in Colorado too, a lot of high school students come to visit the Buddhist temple or Hindu temple or Muslim mosque and synagogue also, the part of the school system. Those are optional things. It's also very good at early ages. They are given something that's something new beyond their faith also for cultural mutual respect, mutual understanding, kind of peace building, so that you don't have a conflict when you grow up. I think in a way also we can do also something similar thing to do also.
Thank you so much. So, Joseph, I'm just going to, you have something to do so patiently. You have so much to say.
Well, thank you very much in the first place. I sometimes remind people that bringing educators together is comparable to herding cats. That they have a tendency to scatter around. And so this is why I truly enjoy this opportunity here to be on the web and be on the internet and to make connections with educators all over the world, I assume. So as you just mentioned, let's do this some more. This is a great vehicle to promote these initiatives. And he and Scott, you may recall that a couple of months ago, I think it was just the three of us, but in the back of my mind, we also have Jean Fidel, yes, and Bruce Hoff, and some other people in the steering committee. But we had a feeling among ourselves that we were really onto something. Remember? There was like a vibe in the air of, hey, this is a movement that has a momentum now. And let's go. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
I'm going to just check in with people on our guests who are in the internet if there's another question or reflection. And also, please, if you are involved with what you think is a very viable and important organization for global citizenship and education, you can just list it so that we can be in touch and begin this increasing the network.
Yeah, so there's a practical question and then a blue sky question. So the practical question is about ensuring that we work with AppSAYU in their efforts, and perhaps you can speak to that. And then the blue sky question is, does this committee have a goal and practical plan to implement this curriculum in public education globally? That's That's above my pay grade, but it's a fantastic question.
Well, I think actually that's a big part of the goal of both organizations, and there is a curriculum, and we've been, I have read it.
Yeah. So,
I just wanted to also add this. Did you want to say something in response?
yeah, can I respond?
Yeah, take a minute or two, and then
Just briefly, yes. So AFSEU is a very well-known organization actually under the umbrella of UNESCO and located in Korea. They work closely with the UNESCO headquarters in Paris, and they develop global citizenship education textbook. And in Korea especially, they adopted that textbook to be implemented in the public school system. And they are trying that out, but not as a requirement, but selected right for now. But I also, one of our organization program participant school also had the textbook. So what they are finding is, as we always talk about, this global citizenship is not a certain separate textbook or subject matter. It has to be holistically integrated throughout the whole teaching and learning processes. In that sense, schools still need some help and professional development to learn how to integrate this into their daily-based teaching and learning. That's what our organization has been doing. But currently, AFSEU is a leading organization providing example curricula for the public school system. To answer the second question, how you're going to make this global citizenship education, the curriculum to be implemented globally, that's what we are trying to do by making International Day of Education for Global Citizenship. We promote the awareness of the importance, and also not only just awareness, but also provide best practice, the framework, how we can make it work, and then provide the teacher professional development, and also convince the policymaker and educate Ministry of Education. That's why we are trying to work with missions in the United Nations, and then the mission has a close connection to their country's Ministry of Education. That has been actually practiced. One of the examples was I worked with the Tunisian mission, and then they made a connection with the Ministry of Education and brought their teachers and students and school, and we demonstrated how education for global citizenship can be integrated into their school system. Then if we replicate it throughout the whole awareness campaign, it's going to be happening. It is all about making better world. So who's going to be, opponent to it, right? So
there are actually, I know of at least 4 organizations that are working on engaged education, resilience, contemplative education, and authenticity. So I'd like to bring those people to us. But one of the areas that we haven't touched on, which is very, very important in our world today, given climate change and our sort of strange disconnection from interdependence. So Edward, I know that you're involved in nature-based earth education, so maybe you could add something. We only have a few minutes left, so we have 15 minutes, but I'd like to ask you to keep it within 4 or 5 minutes, if you don't mind, so that we could continue this conversation.
Thank you. Grateful to be able to try to reflect with all these people. I think what my mind is going to is in light of this interfaith, this open and understanding of global citizenship and science and religion is really try to bring together. That there's a fantastic resource which I find really relates to our connection to nature and the spirit. It's something called the spiritual child, which is a scientific analysis of how allowing children to have an exploratory understanding of what is existence and why do we exist, allowing them to have a spiritual eye in the world, not a dogmatic eye or a materialistic eye, really gives them the foundation to be able to see through challenging obstacles and to also not self-destruct. A lot of these self-destructive tendencies that we see, using drugs and whatnot, these things are buffered against when children have a mystical
self-directed understanding. And I think that Daniel was mentioning about this kind of getting out of the hard dichotomy and allowing self-direction that doesn't just mutilate our spirituality. I find that really connects to this nature-based learning. That in an environment where nature is your whiteboard, students can learn in real time. And to develop a literacy among educators in that kind of environment, I think would be a tremendous feat, and especially in agriculture. I think that might be one of the most important challenges of integrating, especially indigenous practices in agriculture. Just kind of an Apollo 13 mission. It's very necessary for humanity, for marine resource development and for land resource development. So we can have a common base of humanity's agricultural knowledge, and that's a very pragmatic foundation for how sustainable the world can be. So that always comes up, and finding educators who can work in that environment, I think, would be a really tremendous, fascinating challenge to try to find educators in their traditional languages and do that. What are their insights? Because I've found it's hard to even pull all of them out, but to find out how does motivation and purpose come into that, because that's usually where the question of why are we learning comes into what is our purpose in life. And there, I think, are beautiful ways of exploring that with children that don't have a prescribed method, but that at least acknowledge the fact that we are all capable of bettering the planet. So if that's one of our abilities, that must also be a purpose. So how do we explore this purpose and reverence? I think that's the beautiful thing, that we allow the mystic spirit of humankind that animates all of the religions, that reverence is a very different way of approaching it. It allows us to embrace diversity and celebrate diversity, not just tolerate it.
Thank you, Edward. Thank you. It's a really important piece to suffuse into this conversation. Scott, did you have, you were about to say something?
I've got more to say.
Really?
So before we wrapped up today, I wanted to come back to Susan's comment about being seen, because I thought she was touching upon something really important, and Edward has very nicely contextualized that in the use of this word reverence. So having reverence for each other is a profound experience. It's deeply moving for us as individuals. It really helps us to grow as individuals. And my connection to education for global citizenship is that developing that capacity for reverence for people who come from very different places on the planet is part of our calling as human beings today. But Edward really opened up a whole other terrain for us now, that this reverence for others needs another foundation in having reverence for nature. I'm deeply moved by the writings of Derek Jensen, and Derek Jensen writes about the silencing of nature and the profound, even catastrophic effects that has on us as human beings. And we're not even aware of it because it's so deeply embedded in our culture. And his writings are about calling us to attention to that. So the notion of allowing children to have reverence and the space to have reverence for nature is a deeply important part of what I'm called to do, though I do it very haltingly, and look forward to working with Edward to explore to do that a little more powerfully. Thank you.
Just one comment to appreciate what Edward said. I really like the celebration of the diversity rather than tolerance of the diversity. really don't want to use words among us. I really hope we could use different language, not tolerance, celebration, respect, understanding, through the heart.
There's some remarkable words that have come up today that really are moving, like yearning and reverence, and celebration, compassion. Susan's project of IMI and imagination. So very powerful. I just wonder if there's anyone else here at the table who'd like to say something, or Constance, yes.
Connie Rinsing, and was just thinking a lot about, I work in the education fields, and there's a lot of talk around different competencies versus thinking of where we're thinking more about citizenship. And citizenship, I think, is the why, and the global competencies is the how, if you will. And I think that we should capitalize, because there does seem to be some momentum from OECD doing that evaluation of global competence, as well as using the new PISA evaluation and looking at where that goes, and aligning with that somewhat so that we can broadcast our message and put it into some practical ways of integrating it into education fields.
Yeah, and also I read through the OECD's framework on this test-based global competency. It's also rooted from all the UNESCO's intercultural competence, the 4 pillars of learning, and this is all kind of family, but I guess global citizenship has more emphasis on, just as you said, why and fundamental philosophical matter and responsibility. So the competency needs to go with those philosophical fundamental ideas. So I think in that sense, I really hope the OECD build up good test,
yes.
the measurement tool, not to forget about those fundamental aspects, because competency sometimes ends up with competitiveness. So that's what I'm actually closely looking at.
Part of what allows people to step outside the silencing of nature is to have a connection with indigenous cultures. So one thing that our community might consider is to bring together some indigenous leaders to look at some of these global competencies and to kind of give a really careful reading of where are these global competencies helping us and where they're still missing the mark, and then how do we as a global community really push forward and really start to insist that reverence needs to be at the table now, because there's too much at stake by pretending that it's not important.
It is very moving, because what we're talking about is, all of us, I think we're talking about the fact that without providing an experiential learning that changes or expands the mind, all of this is always in the category of concept, competition, understanding, rather than being. So we're really talking, I guess we are having an interfaith conversation, like a beneath different faith conversation about how to awaken awareness. And it seems to me that it is what children yearn for naturally and live out in their childhood. So we only have a few minutes, and this is a conversation that obviously is just starting. So first and foremost, I want to thank Cecilia and Scott for all the work of supporting this, and Georgie and Constance for coming together to make this happen, and Steve for being a technical whiz, Daniel always making notes, and everyone at this table, and all of you speakers and our guests. I'm sure this is just like we're touching the tip, but such essential tip. And please, if anybody who is listening would like to volunteer and work further or be engaged with us in some way, please let us know. Obviously, one of the first ideas was networking. How do we do that? I mean, it was enormous. We're talking about the essence of transformation here in the world. So George, is there anything you'd like to say to close, or anyone? Closing words?
Well, I'd like to really thank everybody here who contributed today, and especially back to Edward's comment on reverence and reverence for the earth, and how that brings us back to how we're going to overcome the obstacles of the SDGs by learning to love our land and eliminating poverty through that loving of farming and bringing youth back to those natural, traditional lifestyles that they're moving away from. And so how important those things are, and how important tradition is, and understanding tradition across cultures. We hope that we can continue these conversations in upcoming webinars, so please send us the comments that we felt were the most intriguing, the most exploratory today, and we can continue this over the months to come with various webinars. So thank you. And thank you, Laura, for being such an inviting moderator.
Oh, thank you. My goodness, hard to be the one to say, to say, that's enough. So for our next 72-hour conversation, we have a sort of 1,000 more nights. So thank you all very much, and particularly to Marit and everybody's names, to Susan and Marek and Tony. I'm really sorry that Kyle was unable to join us. I'm sure he will another time. Let's hope that everything's all right. And I think we should just take a moment together to really just dedicate the goodness of a conversation like this throughout the world to all the children and adults everywhere who are now as fortunate as we are and sit with such a conversation.
So before we go, can anybody who are connected to this virtual meeting room turn on your video, and then we are going to take the screenshot of all of you. And can we change it to the
So let's
gallery
take a
view?
minute first. I want to really dedicate the goodness in there.
Oh, Cecilia!
Gallery view, and please turn on your own video, and you're going to take the, you know how to take it, right? Yeah. So you can look at there, and then you can look at there.
Yeah, so
And
if you're
there.
that way or that way.
Okay, so you're gonna say 1, 2, 3.
Yes, not yet though. There's still more
Please
people
turn
jumping.
on your video, please. More and more. Woo, we're on it.
Oh man.
So please turn on your video. 1.
Wow, this is so cute.
Please more. You know, if there are more people.
But will we get this?
We never approximated in Morocco.
Okay.
Will we get this
So are you
photo?
all there?
Yes, will we get this?
All right.
Okay, let's take picture.
All right, we're gonna take a photo. Okay, ready? So looking there or there, both. 3, 2, 1, and smile. Perfect. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
So cute.
Bye.
We have just a second for a moment for world peace and goodness for all the children of the world and all the adults of the world, even our enemies, so-called enemies. Let's include everyone in with great compassion. Thank you.
Will we get this
You
photo?
guys.
Will we get this photo? Will we get this
We'll send
photo?
it to you afterwards.
Send photo to all the registrants. Bye.
Bye.
You didn't like that joke?
I love that joke. That was a